The move by the federal government to phase out its controversial fuel subsidy removal may no longer be feasible. Once more, as the National Economic Council, NEC, yesterday advised the government to shelve it until all preparatory plans with various segments of government, including states and the incoming administration, are concluded. The National Economic Council says June 2023 deadline for removing subsidy on petroleum products, especially petrol, is no longer feasible. Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, said the council advised that all preparatory work should continue in consultation with state governments and other stakeholders, including representatives of the incoming administration. State House correspondent Desua Omorwa reports.
It's the National Economic Council's first physical meeting of 2023 and the last for the Buhari administration. The topmost economic advisory body, chaired by the Vice President, has converged here to evaluate its mandate in the last 8 years. The Council also discussed post-subsidy removal plans, and with 2 months to its commencement, the Council's decision indicates an imminent postponement.
Council agreed that the timing for the removal of fuel subsidy should not be now, but that we should continue with all of the preparatory works that needs to be done, and that this preparatory work has to be done in consultation with the states and other key stakeholders, including representatives of the incoming administration. Council agreed that the fuel subsidy must be removed earlier rather than later because it is not sustainable. We cannot afford it anymore, but we have to do it in such a way that the impact of the subsidy is as much as possible mitigated on the lives of the ordinary Nigerian.
Asked if there was a timeline to the decisions reached, the minister had this to say.
If the committee's work, which will include the representatives of the incoming administration, determine that the removal can be done by June, then the work plan will be designed to exit as of June. But if the determination is that the period needs to be extended, it will mean that we will have, as a country, will have to revisit the Appropriation Act, for example, because the 2023 budget only made provision up to June. So if we are extending beyond June, it means we have to revisit the Appropriation Act and do a supplementary or amend the bill, and also the PIA.
The 2022 flooding, which was one of the worst in decades, was also discussed.
About 16 states have compiled comprehensively their own report and their losses, and 20 states will bring within next week, so that we'll compile and then submit to our NEC chairman, who will now also discuss with the Presidential Committee on Flooding, so that the two documents will be synchronized and relief will be sent to the victims.
Some members of the council highlight the challenges faced.
During 2015 to date, the country went into economic recession twice. That is a big temptation. And a lot of financial engineering came into play under the chairmanship of the Vice President, and we came out of the recessions.
You cannot do or perform without resources, and the resources are very, very scarce, and the contending needs are there, they are so enormous. So certainly we have discussed all these issues, and we have found ourselves in a medial position to say that going forward, we are very hopeful that the economy will grow, and some of these areas of subsidy removal will definitely give us some lifeline.
As the National Economic Council concludes its valedictory meeting, one thing is clear. The fate of petrol subsidies in Nigeria remains uncertain. With the incoming administration set to take office in just over a month, all eyes will be on the next steps to be taken on the controversial fuel subsidy matter. Adesua Omorwan, Arise News.
Right, your take on this. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Great to be back. Good morning, everyone. Now, I won't say that we're surprised at this because this particular government has said it again and again and assured Nigerians that they would remove subsidy before May 29. In fact, we had a conversation just this week with Mr. Tilewa Adebajo of CFG Advisory, where he hammered on the importance of removing subsidy for the good of the economy. No surprises here because a number of people had said, will the government really do what they've said they'll do in recognition of its impact on the economy. And yesterday's National Economic Council meeting just gave us what we have been waiting for, or perhaps what some people had feared or suspected would happen, which is passing the burden to the next administration to bite that bullet of removing subsidy. Now, governments have come and gone, and they've not had the courage to do this. I mean, the only time this was going to happen during the Jonathan administration caused an uproar, whereby there was what we call Occupy Nigeria, and a number of people went to the streets when the government said it was going to hike the prices of petrol. From the military regime to General Obasanjo's administration, to Alhaji Musa Yar'Adua, to Jonathan, to Buhari, no one has been able to do what a number of organizations, international and local, have said is for the good of the Nigerian economy, which is the removal of subsidy. The PIA Act of 2022 or 2021? 2022 gives 18 months post the act to remove or to deregulate petrol products in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we won't see this under this administration. It's important to also understand perhaps the reason why. According to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Najia Zainab Ahmed, they say that the preparations towards cushioning the effect of the removal of subsidy hasn't made way, especially with other stakeholders involved, governors and other bodies that would be critical to ensuring that the masses do not suffer gravely from this sudden shock to the economy. Unfortunately, what a number of people would then ask is that what has the government been doing since the PIA Act was established? What has the government been doing in terms of assuring Nigerians? Were they not aware that there was a number of things that they had to put into place? There are a number of countries around the world who have tried to remove subsidy where we can take some lessons from. India. The difference between India and Nigeria is that when Nigeria is a major producer of oil, India just produces about 20% of the oil that the country uses. So perhaps you could say that it might have made a bit of sense, or it could make sense to the citizens as to why subsidy could be removed. We learned from Kazakhstan. We know the unrest that happened when Kazakhstan tried to remove subsidy early 2022. And then also Iran. Iran can be compared to Nigeria because Iran also is a major producer of oil. In fact, they produce more crude oil than Nigeria does. But they were able to bite that bullet. What observers, analysts have said time and again is that if this must work, number one, it ought to be gradual, so that the shock and the effect on the Nigerian people would not be so drastic. Because whether we like it or not, yes, we're pushing for it so that we can save money in terms of government spending on subsidy, and the fact that subsidy really does benefit more the rich than the poor in terms of who uses this, the products. But what has happened again and again is that in terms of planning for this, they have not quite done it properly. So subsidy is going to be hard on the common man in terms of how much money, how things, the inflation that would, the constituent inflation. We've looked at food inflation recently, how the price of food and goods have gone up. But the truth is that it has still been said that this still has to be done. So the big question will then be, come June 2023, when it will be 18 months post the PIA, would the Tinubu administration be willing and ready to bite this bullet? Again, the coming days or perhaps weeks will tell.
Well, a number of quick points. This is the National Economic Council saying that, the fuel subsidy, also known as under recovery in the oil and gas sector of Nigeria, will no longer be removed by the deadline of May 29. And that the reason is that they want to ensure, the federal government wants to ensure that other stakeholders involved in this are carried along. Well, the stakeholders are already discussing. The National Economic Council is a creation of Section 153, Sub 1, of the 1999 Constitution, and paragraphs 18 and 19 of Part 1 of the third schedule. But we must note that it is an advisory body chaired by the Vice President of Nigeria, and in terms of composition, you have the state governors or the states of the Federation, and also the governor of the Central Bank. So whatever they have said at this point, within the purview of what the law says, remains advisory. It is still for the president to act on it. However, if we backtrack a little, it was Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Finance, National Planning and Budget, who announced this recommendation by the National Economic Council. It amounts, in my view, to Zainab Ahmed eating her own words, because it will be recalled that before now, she was the one who also informed us that, oh, the fuel subsidy has to go by May 29, and that it cost Nigeria 3.3 trillion last year alone. And we had made a point on this same program at the time that President Muhammadu Buhari, granting an interview to Bloomberg, I'd say, oh, because of consequences, the Buhari administration will have to postpone it. And they did. Okay? The Petroleum Industry Act gives a deadline of 18 months. That deadline expires by June 1 this year. The second thing is that in Budget 23, the Appropriation Act, and people should remember this, the budget is a law. That's why it's called Appropriation Act. Already also stipulates that the under-recovery provided for in that budget will subsist only till June 1. So which means that there are issues here with regard to legislation. You will need to amend the Petroleum Industry Act, the act that was brought into effect to address regulatory, fiscal, and governance issues in Nigeria's oil and gas sector in line with changing realities within that sector. Number two, the Appropriation Act 2023 will also have to be reviewed in case you need to make provisions for further extension. Now, what Zainab Ahmed, eating her words, has now told us is that stakeholders, representatives of the incoming administration will be brought in, and that they can decide either to go ahead or to take a decision in the opposite direction and keep the subsidy, and that whatever decision they take, if they want to keep it, then, of course, those two pieces of legislation that I've pointed out will have to be reviewed. So that will include also the National Assembly of Nigeria as stakeholders in this particular matter. But what is the point? I thought that the decision that the National Economic Council is just reaching out was foreseeable. Because, a new government coming, we raise the question here, are you going to take a decision for a new government? Now they've said, oh, that new incoming administration will have to make an input. There are other issues on which this incoming next administration will also have to take decisions. One of the things that was announced this week was that Nigeria Air will start operating by May 29. It is going to take the responsibility for all the issues that may arise therefrom. So in the last moments, remaining for this administration, there are so many other things that will have to be looked at. However, Zainab Ahmed made a point that I think we can underscore. She says that it is clear that there is a consensus that the subsidy regime is unsustainable. That indeed is the position of everyone who had looked at the subject, whether it's the IMF or it is the World Bank or it is home-based economists, for the reason that the fuel subsidy, the opaqueness around it, has been described as a source of great inefficiency and uncertainty. For economic reasons, it has also been said, look, Nigeria cannot sustain it because Nigeria needs to free resources to address other issues. So there's no argument in that regard. However, I recall that in April 5 or thereabouts, this same Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, came forward and said Nigeria had secured $800 million from the World Bank for post-subsidy removal palliatives to address the interests of the poor and the vulnerable. That $800 million has been very controversial. Some civil society groups led by Rasmanjani reportedly went to the IMF and World Bank to say, don't give Nigeria that money. In case that money has been given, it is our money. We want an update on that 800 million. Where is it? Has it been collected? Or what is the plan for that $800 million? That's the only missing part in the report from the National Economic Council, in my view.
Yes, Dr. Abati, we want an update. Just like we want an update on how $1.2 million was spent. and the drivers stopped stop our students midway, delay them for 4 to 5 hours, how to collect their passports before they continue the journey in Sudan. Just like we want update on that. I want to see the receipts of who they pay. Is it transport company or drivers? Because you see, in this country, we don't know what to say again. Concerning subsidy, I think I like to quote Fela a lot. Let me sing this morning. Fela say, if I sing, say, food do not dey, now old news it be that, old news it be that, oh. If I sing, say, inflation, it's old news. If I sing, say, subsidy, we all know that the reason why they are not pulling out of this subsidy is because some people are stealing. They scam, pure and simple. We deceive ourselves too much in this country. I knew they were not going to pull it out. I knew it was all part of the Nigerian game and joke. How would they pull it out when some people are stealing heavily? Has NNPC remitted money to the federal purse in how many years? We are living by the grace of God. These are the same people. Let's remind them a little bit. Dr. Bati, you remember them, that they campaigned against the government you served in 2012. When you wanted to pull out the subsidy on us, they said, no, they occupy Nigeria. They gave themselves pepper soup on the streets and were protesting. We can't remove subsidy. And that was the best time they could have removed it. When they got power, the next thing they said was, subsidy is not true, it's a scam. The same people that said it was a scam started paying what they call under recovery. They changed the name. You know, when we want to line, it's going to change the name. Then after a while, they came out to openly say they were paying subsidy. But the bill has increased tremendously. Why? Because of many ample factors, forex, many things. So we are in dire straits as we speak. But despite this, because it suits their own interests, they want to continue with the corruption. That's why today we have a lot of opaqueness. So finally, when we signed the PIA to be able to open the petroleum sector to a lot of opportunity, they still close it because it's about their own personal corruption. That's it, pure and simple. These are the same people that came to tell us that, oh, they have pulled out subsidy during Kachiku. You remember when international price of crude went so down that it was even pretty close to $1 per liter, per barrel or thereabouts. That prices went down in this country to about 160 something or 130 something naira. They said, oh, we are fully deregulated. So the lies are so much that we don't know what to believe again in this country. Two things I knew. I knew they were not going to pull out subsidy because they would not want the new incoming administration feel unpopular. But the question is, will the administration coming in have the political will to pull it out? It's a campaign promise. And I had said on this show many times that I will support any administration that's ready to pull out subsidy because it's a corruption cesspit and pit of hell, of corruption, that this country's wealth is being frittered away by just few people. But now we've kicked the can down the road. Part of the things they need to account for, Dr. Abasi, that 800 million. Have they started sharing the money to the 10 million families? Because we need to ask. A lot of people kicked against those families on the social register. The same people, we in this country, that we couldn't share palliative, common Indomie, effectively. We want to share $800 million now. They've increased worker salary by 40% now. So we are going to stop on all of that all of a sudden. This minister, poor her, and I feel for her. Madam Minister, I feel for you. Because I know it's not you. I know it's people that are pulling strings at the back. I feel for you if you are watching me this morning. You remember how you came out to announce that subsidy has to go the last year? The people at the back told you don't try it. So they've made you eat your word on 2-3 occasions now. They are making you look like the bad person. But if you know in Nigeria, you know. If it didn't day, it didn't day. So we keep deceiving ourselves and we keep kicking the can down the road. Until we have the political will to do what is right, Nigeria will not move forward. And this subsidy issue has become very political and is fast becoming old news. Since the Yom Kippur Wars, the first time we brought about subsidy was the Yom Kippur Wars to be able to address the shortfalls in 73, 74 occasioned by the Yom Kippur Wars that made crude oil prices rise from $3 per barrel to about $10, $12 per barrel. And since then, it has opened an array for people to be able to eat, chop. And you see, where people are chopping too much in this country, they don't tell themselves the truth. And the funny thing is that despite how much they've eaten from Nigeria, they've eaten Nigeria dry. They are even eating the bone now. They don't care. They will call it Ashame Egu.